All right. So, hey, welcome back to the Go4CEO channel. This is John the Bomb. Building others means business. And this lady is doing some really cool things in the solutions business, right? So, we're going to walk you through the story here. Michelle Griffin is the founder and CEO of Griffin Resources, an end-to-end business solutions provider based in Tampa, sunny Florida. Since founding her company, Michelle has built Griffin Resources into a comprehensive organization offering HR outsourcing, talent acquisition, sales strategy, and operational support services on a fractional hourly basis with no monthly retainers requirements. So, pretty cool, Michelle. Cool, and love to have you on the Go4CEO channel. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to kind of talk about my journey and hopefully help others, inspire others, and things of that nature. So,
I
thank
love it.
you.
I love it. We typically start our interviews with, tell us the ideation. Like, obviously, Griffin Resources, it's a little bit of your last name and some inspiration there, obviously. But did you start in the industry? Were you doing something so different that you're like, oh, you had an idea and started this? What are some of the inroads of how you got to Griffin Resources?
Yeah, and what's funny is I didn't name it. So, I'll kind of talk about all that as well.
Okay.
So I was actually, my history and my background is in HR, and my higher education is in something called industrial organizational psychology, which
Oh,
is the research degree of human capital in the workforce. And I started getting my doctorate in 2017 or 2018. And then right around 2019 is when I thought I could become an independent contractor while I was getting my doctorate and kind of have a little more flexibility to focus on that. So I worked out an exit strategy with the company I was working for at the time. I was their director of HR at a company that was about 100 people. And I was the only, HR department of one kind of thing at that point. And I, they were really great. I was really privileged because that CEO really supported me. I was able to basically start a bunch of marketing. I could advertise, I could shout from the rooftops that I was going independent without trying to have to hide it from my company. So I actually had a 90-day exit strategy with that company where I got my full complete salary while I was starting up my new business. So within that 90 days, I was able to find my first client. And from the last day of that company to the first day with that client, I didn't have a gap. So I started with a new client on October 1st in 2019. And by January of 2020, I had 8 clients and had hired 2 full-time people. And then I had the idea that if I hired people and they did the work, I could have passive income. I now know that owning a business is not passive whatsoever. That was definitely a lesson learned, but that was my thought process. And I didn't have a company for a while. I established the LLC in December of 2019 when a friend of mine that is a financial advisor and family wealth planner, he was like, you need an LLC. He's like, that's the whole point. It's a limited liability corporation. Like you have to have it and separate your personal from your business. And I didn't want to create the entity until I knew the name, and I could not come up with a name. And he, after like weeks of like him kind of yelling at me, he finally was like, I don't know, name it Griffin Resources. What does it matter? And I was like, oh, I really like that. And so honestly, I didn't name my own company, but I also didn't pick out the colors. My favorite color is blue, and the company's everything is pink. That was my husband and a web developer basically getting together. We bought the domain that was my name, michellemegriffin.com, and this was all before we had a name for it. And essentially took my resume and turned it into a digital platform, and that was what our initial sales like prompting thing was. And from there, they made it pink. And I mean, our logo hasn't changed since. It still looks like it was made on Word. It's not complicated or fancy. And from there, we just kind of kept it and ran with it. And I've never rebranded, I've never renamed the company, and it just is what it is now. Um, I didn't come up with an offering. I just basically started talking to business owners and said, I am capable of performing, HR. This is what I know about it. This is how I have functioned in the past with larger businesses. And I'd been in different industries. I was with an IT tech company that had about 850 employees across 10 states and 4 countries, and I ran HR for all of it. And then I left there and went to the smaller company that had 100 people that was a residential construction company. And since I just shifted industries and could really set up HR in pretty much anywhere, my first client was actually in healthcare. My second client was in food production. My third client was actually in manufacturing. And so I basically just molded into any industry and any platforms they were using. And it became their idea to give me an internal email address and just hand me the keys to the castle and say, you perform HR now. And I did not expect that to be the offering. I thought I could consult and say, this is how you should be performing HR. This is how you should be reducing your risks. And whoever's doing HR should have support, because in small businesses, usually they're not, it's not their full-time job to be doing HR in small companies. So that's what I thought I would be doing. And that is not what it came out to be. It just molded itself through what business owners wanted. And I've stayed really flexible ever since.
Well, flexibility, simplicity, all the agitators of action. So I love it. I love it. Really cool thing here. I will say the story of being able to kind of be internally an entrepreneur, in my opinion, and then be able to take that and have a 90-day launch off period is really unique. And it's really interesting. Can you go a little bit deeper? I mean, did you share the story with your current employer, since you had that kind of mentor-mentee relationship? Did you share with them, hey, look, I'm looking to kind of launch this thing. So did you set up a specific, contract with them? Did they know specifically that you were looking for outside ways to bring in a first client? What were some of those dynamics?
It was actually their idea. So once I told them I was getting my doctorate, I wanted to stay with company for another year. And they were like, well, if you're not a lifer, like, let's just transition and exit out. And I was like, but I'm not ready. And I was like, I thought I could be a contractor or something like that. And he goes, you know what? You would be a really great independent contractor. Because I had been there about 2 years at that point, 2.5 years. And he's like, honestly, everything I did for the company, he's like, you could have done that under contract. He's like, they didn't replace me. They brought in a lower level HR person who just maintained everything I built. And they actually became a client for me to go in and update I built custom assessments for them for being able to assess their incoming talent. We built tons of processes, reduce their turnover. Especially in the construction industry, we had to find talent that was wanting to grow in and move into that industry. So we had to hire people that really didn't have a history in the construction industry, and then put training programs together, career pathing. Like if you name a subject matter HR can touch, I had the full authority to change it and update it, and it was really cool. That's where I kind of learned where I was really truly capable of it, and got to apply my education from IO psychology. But once we were having those conversations, they were like, we'll just pay you your full salary. We'll break it up into 3 months. The first month was making sure they could find the right person that I was going to, train. My second month was training them and them moving into my office. I was moved into a tiny office that was essentially a closet that they put a desk in and a windowless little room. But I was allowed to take phone calls. I could take, any kind of meetings that I needed to. The CEO started taking me onto other meetings when it came to the county and the government. I learned a lot more about, obviously in networking events and things like that he was doing with the chamber. And so he kind of really helped me, start networking and getting out that way. And I ended up using a lot of those relationships, or even how to network and how to use my network is also what I learned. My husband is really good at business. We actually own 5 businesses together. And at that time, we were both, when we were both in corporate jobs, and I was the first one to go independent. By the middle of COVID is when his business wasn't doing well that he was working in. So he went independent and started working essentially in mine. We took the profits that we had at that point, and he started doing IT hardware distribution, which is what his industry was. And we both just performed those business functions under Griffin Resources. We didn't break them apart until 2023 when Griffin IT became its own entity and Griffin Resources broke apart. And then we have a parent company, Griffin Capital Holdings, which I own 51%, he owns 49%. And that business owns everything else we own. And then we have other businesses. One is not revenue generating. It's Griffin Cloud, and we use that to, which will answer some of the questions later about how we support ourselves. What systems do we use? And we actually home grew most of them. We have a lot of in-house developers. Between all the entities, we have about 150 employees across 3 countries. And so he grew kind of his empire kind of like next to mine. We now kind of compete on his is way surpassing mine, but we try to compete in a healthy way.
Nice, nice. Well, the one question that came up is in that little closet, did you have a red stapler?
I'm wishing I
So,
had now.
I know,
Where's
right?
my
They didn't give
stapler?
you the red stapler. Darn it. All right. So, well, neat. I mean, look, obviously it's a unique thing, but it's also something that I think a lot of, people that want to be an entrepreneur, that are entrepreneurs, are looking for that kind of exit plan. I had a young lady that's local here, that had a marketing company that had that similar scenario of more of the angst side, right? She didn't know if she could launch off because she wanted to
Hmm.
obviously still make money and have a living when she left her job. But it was kind of that one major opportunity that launched her into her business. So it sounded like the same thing where you had that continuity within, you found that 1 or 2 good clients, and then obviously, it was a 90-day scale up program. So, look, it sounds like you've also been able to put in different measures and different businesses. But let's start even at that first 120 to, let's say, through 6 months. What was some
Hmm.
of that criterias? Were you looking for certain industries since you had gotten that one in that specific, that specific client? Or did you just kind of start to market to a broader range of people for the services that you were providing?
It was marketing to a broader range, and it a lot of people had told me in the beginning that I would, you kind of start out really desperate of it doesn't really matter the client, and eventually you can afford to be pickier and turn down clients that you may not want to work with. Um, and then the companies were different sizes, different industries, and it really took me a while to narrow down what is my target market. And to be honest, I still don't really have a target market, even now that I have about 85 clients. Um, we are the smallest client we have is 2 employees. The largest is 500. And in some situations, we just perform their entire HR and we run their payroll and we do everything. In other situations, we're just a small piece of their department and supporting them in whatever need they may, want for support and help. And it might just be project based or it might be ongoing, continuous. Some of our clients we've had for 3 or 4 years. Some we haven't. I don't think we have any original companies from the first year, but definitely from the second year, they've stuck around. Most of the time, our engagement is about 12 months, 6 to 12 months, and that's usually just because they only need us for a specific growth spurt or some kind of specific need, and we're not designed to stay forever. I mean, fractional work is more expensive than hiring your own labor when it comes down to dollar for dollar of output, but it's if you don't necessarily need to deal with the full overhead and the taxes and the liability, we can come in, support you and leave. And we're designed to leave. You don't have to worry about, any kind of risk involved in that. So it takes away all that headache is what you're really paying for in the ROI that comes out of that. But um, they're all owned. They don't even have commonality of how they're functioning or how they're owned. We have private equity owned. We have, personally owned nonprofits, government agencies. We're in most of the continental US. We also have foreign owned parent companies. So we have companies that are located in England, Scotland, Spain, Canada, Australia. We work in different time zones. So we really, the commonality of it really is that they are able to make decisions about how they want to run their business. And they know that what they're going into is an investment, whether it be HR or payroll or organizational development of some kind, sales operations, any leadership coaching, anything like that. It really is an investment back into the people and the organization, and for an improvement process. What hasn't worked out is when companies have to be told that they need us, like if it's a business coach that usually doesn't work out. We can't convince a CEO to understand what we offer if they don't really get it. The leadership coaches or the business coaches have tried to kind of make us work with companies, and those relationships don't work out.
Well, you brought up an interesting point, right? I think fractional industry has exploded the last probably 5 to 10 years. I've had CMO
Mm-hmm.
fractionals, CFO fractionals.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first times I've had an actual HR fractional, but I've met some HR people. My sister-in-law actually just through an acquisition got laid off at a big New York global billion-dollar business as head of HR. She got let go, and she's actually starting to kind of look at this, and I'm sure I'll share this episode with her. But it's an interesting topic of how to have that fractional dynamic and build a business and then implement almost project-based stuff like you just shared, right? So, now you've obviously gone into different industries and you've been able to kind of be flexible. Human capital in general has a similar sense. So tell us, was it the education that really kind of built the foundation, or was it the experiences that once you got into day-to-day life of everything that you did in HR that has set the foundation of how you run Griffin Resources?
Ironically, neither. So back
Okay.
when my husband, when we were younger, so my husband and I, we've been together 20 years now. And so when we were in our 20s, he would travel a lot for business. And I was always really jealous of that because I always had corporate jobs. And I wanted to know, how do I get to travel and run around and get to visit new places? And he was like, I don't know, become a consultant. And I was like, well, you have to be an expert in something to consult. And he was like, go become an expert in something. And I had always liked psychology. And initially, I started my master's degree in human behavior science. And when I couldn't really get a job in that, because it was at that time, it was about 2008. So we're talking like right at that crash. And I also didn't really have a background in research. My background had been corporate at that point. So I decided to switch my focus of my master's to industrial organizational psychology. And then I had to figure out what jobs relate to that, and figured out that HR was the practical application of IOPsych. And so then I went and started figuring out how to get a job in the field in some way. And that's how I ended up getting a job at ConnectWise, which is a large IT company. At the time, they had about 300 employees and they were privately owned. Um, they have since sold to private equity for like $2 billion, but they were much smaller at the time. And so that being my first job. My thought process was I needed 10 years of experience, certifications in higher education, and that was my plan. And so I worked in HR for about 8 years and got certifications and got my master's, and then decided that I could go on to become a consultant. And then I didn't actually mean to start the business, but once I did and created the business for it, um, I always wanted to still be able to work remote. That was still the goal. And COVID really allowed me to do that, because before that, all my clients wanted me to be on site, and or once eventually it became employees and not me anymore. But I lost a lot of time driving to different locations. It was limited to the capacity of physically being there. Once everything went on lockdown and people could work remote, we could perform more work in a time frame. We could fractionally support multiple businesses in a single day. We could hire people in obviously different locations. We could have clients in different locations, and it really allowed us to expand and become the norm to be able to do that. And so I really wanted that to always kind of essentially be the focus of how to provide really good resources and services to companies. So obviously hiring the right people, attracting the right talent, understanding what our service offerings of work-life balance, working remote, needed to stand the test of time beyond COVID and into now. People can go back to work, and some people prefer that and they want to be in person with people, versus some people want to just be able to be at work on their computer, turn off their computer, and focus on their family. And that's really the type of talent that works well in our environment. And so we started focusing on what makes what makes employees good for us, and vice versa. What's things that they value, and how do we make this a good place to work for them? So that became the focus over the years internally, and then externally was being able to work with our clients both fractionally and kind of like, I would say like in person as well as online. So we do have some where we will travel, and or if they happen to be close enough to the person that they work with, then they'll go on site. So we do still do some sort of stuff on site, but now we still travel. And I work remote from different places, different countries. And my husband and I now travel usually 1 to 2 weeks a month, every month. I'm actually
So
leaving
go.
today for Europe. I leave tonight we're going to Amsterdam for the weekend, and then we'll be in northern Portugal and Spain. Then we'll spend the weekend in Zurich and come home.
Well, I was just going to say, look, Go for CEO community, what you really picked up on there is that her dream was to travel and do business. And she created a lifestyle out of that, put a plan together, assessed where she was at, and then aligned yourself with the right people. So really, really cool stuff. I think that it's one of the things that holds people back, right? Is not having that true understanding of what they really want. You wanted to travel, you wanted to do business, you wanted to be unshackled per se, right? So really, really cool to hear that and to kind of see the fruition of how that's become a
I
real
would say it
business.
took me like almost 15 years to pull it off, but I pulled it off.
No, no, hey, but you had it planted in your subconscious that that's kind of the way that you want to do it. You just put the steps together to allow you to do it. And hey, it's a 15-year overnight success, right? That's I love that story, and I think that's part of what the Go for CEO community is all about, is just understanding how do you put those steps together. What were some of the ideas, and that leads me to, traveling does get expensive, and building a business gets expensive. I'm a commercial banker by trade. What are some of the things that you did? Did you bootstrap with your husband these
Hmm.
businesses, or did you look
Yeah.
for funding or investors, anything like that?
Yeah, we actually have friends that are investors, but we turned them down because I didn't want to give up any kind of ownership of the business or
Okay,
businesses. Everything is homegrown. We did everything as with the cash we built as we built it. It was so I would say it was kind of slow, but it did kind of spark up quite quickly. How we afford to travel is Griffin IT, because that business is supported on hardware. We have a lot of that purchasing is on credit cards, and we have millions of credit card points because of that. So we take advantage of being able to travel that way. So we don't usually pay for our flights, and we don't usually pay for our hotels. And so we have the ability to just kind of pay for whatever we would have for our own entertainment. And to us, it's almost no different of what we would have spent being in town versus being away.
sure.
And so that's how we can now afford to do that. But for the setup of the businesses, typically it can be very expensive to run businesses. And rather than spend the money, we decided to build things ourselves. So for example, I was spending a lot of money for doing, for an IT support company, for a managed service provider. And that could cost me thousands of dollars a month. And so what we ended up doing, we had all of the cybersecurity and ability and backend to be our own managed service provider through Griffin IT. So that's what we did. We basically decided to create a managed service provider entity, and we are just our own clients. We don't sell it, we don't support it, we don't want to have that as like a service. We could. It technically is sellable. We just don't. We were spending a lot of money on Salesforce. So rather than continue to spend thousands of dollars on Salesforce, we decided to become the ability to license our own software. And so we now have our own CRM that we can also technically resell and license. And we have developers that customize our own CRM that are in the Philippines. Our team in the Philippines is about 20 people right now. And we have our own developers for all of that. If we need something that is like a dynamic survey or a fillable form, I have a Smartsheets developer, and I can work with him to just create anything I need. And so there's just, rather than go out and pay for a lot of services, we just decided to have our own marketing team, developers. We have Power BI. Pretty much like if there's a way we could figure out to do it internally rather than pay a firm to do it, we have figured it out. And that's where partnering with the people that we have in the Philippines became, a really big saving grace for us, for having outsourced talent that way. So that's how we did it, because we just found more exclusive ways that we could control the talent that we were having and the output of that talent, but also being able to do that with, foreign talent that is less expensive.
You know, there's a saying, right? When you don't, let's say, have unlimited resources, you become resourceful, right? And that's what you do. You did, and it's really interesting because, look, the talent around the world has become open now, right? Obviously, the pandemic opened up our eyes. I always joke. Yesterday, I'm in Chicago, Illinois. I'm in one of the suburbs, about 45 minutes away. I had this busy day, and then I go to a networking event that was live. And it took me an hour and 20 minutes to get downtown. And I'm like, man, sometimes it's frustrating because you get that sense once you understand how technology can help you, that you could have 4 or 5 meetings rapidly instead of an hour and a half in the car. And then hopefully you're making calls, but now it's illegal to be on your phone and, all this stuff going
Hmm.
on. So interesting stuff. So, well, look, Tampa, Florida is a cool place to be. Have you figured any new other satellites around the country, or are you centrally in Tampa and then obviously have the international team force?
So most of the team members for Griffin Resources there's a few in Tampa because that's where I knew people and could initially start the business. But since then it has kind of spiraled out a little bit. So we have team members in South Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, New Jersey, and we have contractors in Texas and California. Um, and actually we have contractors in New York now too. So there's quite a few people in the team that are I would say I've never even met them in person, which is also weird and kind of bad to say. Um, One of the HR strategists that I have I have one client left that I've had for 4 years, 4.5 years now. And it was from when I was still taking HR clients, and I'm still their fractional CHRO. And since I've been so ingrained with them, it's not a client I can just pass off. It's just something I'm involved in now, which is really great because I can at least stay in connection with what my team members have to live with and do every day. It's not like I can kind of live in my little, up on my pedestal and kind of tell everyone how to run the company. I get to feel their pain, which is really great to know what it's like to still do the work. So I don't intend to change that anytime soon. But she works with me there, and I meet with her every single week. And I've met with her every single week for 4 years, and she lives in New Jersey. And so she's an amazing team member. I brag about her quite often. I've never met her in person. And so it's just wild. I've had employees that I've definitely had for many, many years that I still have never met.
Well, and that's the world now. I joke around sometimes in my interviews that in my day job, right, of commercial banking, I'll close a multi-million dollar piece of business that we acquire a business or equipment financing or whatever. And until I get to the closing table, it's just all been communication over the phone, on Zoom or Teams, and
Hmm.
that's just it's a culture shift, but it's also been something I think very dynamic that makes us all flexible and allows us to really go for CEO, right, and be empowered to do what we got to do. So, well, Michelle, I know a lot of things are dynamic about your business, right? It's really cool the remote side of things, the way that you built it, the 90-day contract that you built in your 10-year plan at the end, really cool stuff. So, anything as far as being an HR person initially, having that background, and now with the talent that you have, are there any criteria that you look for? Obviously, you've had this lady that you spoke so affectionately about in New Jersey. Where there's some things that you attract now that that talent wise will fit into the 4 or 5 or 10 businesses that you have?
Typically for what we look for is they really have to want to do this kind of work. For the fractional space, it literally feels like you have 4 or 5 part-time jobs and then project-based work that we assign. So it's not easy. You have to be able to multitask. You have to be able to use your resources. It's all billable time. So people have to clock their time. If you're used to being, salaried, that is really difficult. Even talking with people that, maybe went from being in a corporate position and just wanted to start their own business, wanted to become their own independent contractor, they have a really hard time figuring out how to bill. And that is something that it took me years, bumps, bruises, losing money, figuring it out, and to have a streamline of money that I can afford to pay my talent and then get paid afterwards. So we used to do pre-billing. It is a nightmare to track and scale and grow that way. So we, after about a year and a half, had to basically just wait, do the work for a month, and then post bill at the end. So for a whole month, I didn't actually collect money while I was going from pre-billing to post-billing. And then there's, 15-day terms to collect the money, which is then usually late. So I don't usually receive the money for, essentially 2 months after the work has been performed. And I had to have enough money saved up to be able to continuously pay payroll for several payroll cycles before the money starts coming back in. But we need people that are going to be clocking their time. And so everything has to be done not only for payroll, but also for the end of the month billing. And that is something that I would say we still have to stay on top of. People have to make sure that things obviously are being clocked. And if they're not used to doing that, that tends to really drive people nuts. So they have to be flexible if they're coming from a salaried position, especially if they've been an HR professional for a long time. We do have, VP of HR managers, like people that come from the higher level HR side that haven't clocked their time in probably a decade. But to be able to be a billable, service-based company, it's something that we really can't get away from. And that's why I don't like doing retainers. I feel they take advantage of us because they'll just push us to the limits. We feel taken advantage of if, so if the ROI is not there for either company, it just doesn't feel right. And it ends up not working out. And so that's why I got rid of any type of retainer or minimums or requirements and just went to, we bill our time, we charge you for what we clock. And it's worked out really well, but it became something that the owners really had, I've worked a lot with just business owners to build what we have. And I would say for a lot of the advice, especially if like did you say it was your sister-in-law? Who did you say was recently laid off?
Sister-in-law, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would even be willing to, if she's wanting to, people that like almost like semi-retire or, they kind of just figure out that maybe they want to do something fractionally even on their own and not like with a company or a firm. It's hard because you have to go get your own clients versus, and you get paid way more if you do it on your own versus, we pay an hourly rate versus we collect the, larger chunk of it. So a lot of times we'll have contractors or people work for us because they don't want to take the time to market and go get their own work, but we'll assign them work. So that's worked out well for people like that. But if they want to start their own thing and collect all the money themselves, it's way more lucrative. But I usually give a lot of advice to people of how did we start up? What systems do we use? How does it make sense from like an actual business perspective? Because I feel like anybody could do this. What we did uniquely as fractional HR is still not a very well-known like industry. I don't have a lot of competitors in what we do, but it is something that we are able to stay flexible and nimble with. And other companies that have tried it have not figured out how to stay profitable in it because of the overhead and the resources that are needed and the legal services that are needed and, and being able to stay on top of things like that. So we were able to overcome all that, but there was a lot of bumps and bruises along the way.
Well, nothing to go for CEO, right? You got to build a business and go through those bumps and bruises. And you talked a big deal there the last few minutes about cash flow management, right? And Go for CEO community, this is kind of a big part of staying in business, of knowing how your payables and your receivables are working within your business, and knowing when you bring on talent. A lot of people, as a self-employed, owning your own job entrepreneur, fear that portion of it because, like you said, they don't know if the cash flow is strong enough to bring in that piece of talent, or will their personal income go down for a moment
Hmm.
to be able to supplement that. So really, really interesting stuff. So Michelle, as we end the interview, we always go through the cycle of CEO. So client experience, engagement, and that could be with your employees, with your contractors, with your clients, and how you engage and build a culture, and then operational excellence. So, as far as a value proposition, when you think about Griffin Resources, high level, 60 seconds or so, what is that for client experience?
What we set out to do was help small to mid-sized businesses that don't know what they don't know and really reduce the risk for them when it came to HR or payroll, or just take the tasks, the everyday task and tactile work that has to be done off of the CEOs or CFOs or CEOs, because the C-suite are the ones typically still holding on to that responsibility, and you can't grow and run the business when you're still doing those things. So that was the initial service offering, and it grew to having sales operations and sales coaching and leadership coaching, because we started getting asked a lot more about how to help them grow the business once we got the stuff off their plate. And so that also became something we were, wanting to offer, as people were wanting to just figure out how to expand and grow, especially, kind of seeing what the markets are changing, the economy is changing, and take advantage of some of opportunities that they could. So that's what we followed and went with.
I love it. I love it. So engagement, right? Seems like, you always had this dream of traveling. Do you bring your employees or contractors with you, meet up places? What do you do to build that engagement culture within Griffin Resources?
For working remotely, we tend to make sure people stay connected, especially virtually. So we do introduce team members together. They do have to work together, so they do get to do that virtually. Most recently, we had some stay-at-home moms that their kids are the same age, and even though they had both been with the company for 3 years, they both have 3-year-olds, and they'd only met a couple times because one is in recruiting and the other one is in payroll, so they don't overlap a lot. And so we recently put together a mommy and me group so that the two of them, and there's actually a third one that also has children, but isn't necessarily in the same boat as they are as far as like childcare. We put them together to say, connect and learn and talk about your resources. So we try to make sure that when we do have like off time, like not billable time, but we call it Griffin time or dead time, that it's meaningful to them. I don't typically like travel for work or make it about work, but I can. And I've actually met a client in Scotland that was from there. That was really interesting and had a lot of fun with that. And one of my team members that I have been friends with for a long time, she worked for me when we were at ConnectWise. And so I have been her boss for 11 years of her life. And because of that, we were also very good friends. And she came, we had a group of people, but her and I do travel together. And we went to Madrid last year together, but there was like 5 of us that went. And then we have a friend that was in Germany that popped over and joined us there. So it's also kind of inspired others to be able to either work remote or take advantage of, the support systems that we have in place with our company. So that same girl, she is currently in northern Italy hiking at the moment. She's off the grid, which is, I don't like that she's not accessible, but she is on vacation, and we are respecting that. And so she has gone completely dark for 2 weeks as a head of a department. And so we have enough. We've really wanted to make sure all of our team members are able to do that. One of our other team members went to Italy as well, just about 2 weeks ago. She was gone for a week. So a lot of people are able to take time with their family, take vacations, and we really worked out to be able to support them and that kind of thing. So they get to see us do that and hopefully get to live out their dreams too.
Yeah, and there's an art to it, right? Obviously, having a good, strong bench is ideal for those people to take off those times and really, like you said, disconnect and go off the grid. And sometimes it could be scary to have that situation, but it sounds like you put in the right resources and bench strength to be able to help that, right, happen for those people. So, and created that culture out of it. So, last one is operational excellence. You mentioned that you guys were very resourceful and creating systems, and you did your own CRM that now you could license. Is everything internal, or are there any other tools that you're using externally that you could share with our audience?
I mean, I would say we've taken advantage of a lot of tools. And then just made sure we hired an expert in that area. So some of them, for example, like Smart Sheets, Power BI, the Adobe licensing. So we have a pretty powerful Adobe tool. And then we just make sure we have experts in it. Obviously, Canva, and then we have our marketing experts. So there's quite a bit of tools that we'll use, and then we just make sure we have the right talent to manage that. So those, I would say, like, it was more about finding, that's probably the harder part, is having tools that you don't know how to use or that you don't know how to implement. And
Yeah.
do not ask me how to use Smart Sheets. I don't know all it can do. I barely can probably scratch the surface, but I can ask my expert anything and be like, is this possible? How about this? Is this a good idea? Let's go run with this. And so I've made quite a few different, I've pushed that system to the limits, but to be honest, I don't actually know exactly what it can do. So I feel like, and the same kind of thing with Power BI, we pull a lot of data from different sources, and which is a lot of what it's designed to do. There's APIs that can pull information out, and Power BI is really powerful. It does a lot of calculations and analytics and throws things in digestible charts and dashboards for you. One thing I pushed it to was go grab dynamic data from a spreadsheet, and we're gonna I think we used Make or Zapier, or I don't know what we used, but we now have Power BI pulling information from spreadsheets that incorporate it and compare that to their time in Clockify. And so that's the system that we use for clocking time. And then we use Zero for our accounting. We have two accountants, and they'll help prepare payroll, and they'll prepare our invoicing, and obviously everything they do for bookkeeping and things like that. So I would say we just try to make sure we use the tools to the best of our ability, and then we will have automation experts that make sure things can talk, and we try to reduce the manual overhead over it. So we have a lot of
Nice, nice.
visionary
Well,
behind it all.
you've been very resourceful, and I love the line there that you said, "Hey, I may not know what this specific tool does, but I went and got the expert, right? I got that talent resource to be able to help you, because that person or individual has spent some time in there and can then, from your ideas, create the type of action and activities, right? That'll help. So it's really really cool. So Michelle, we love to end with, obviously, how do they get a hold of you? What's your website? Where do they reach out to you to be able to engage with, your entity and what you guys do?
Our website has all of the contact information in it, including my direct contact information, but it's griffin-resources.com. And so all of our information about our services and how to reach us, if you chat it on there, it goes directly to our head of sales. And usually it goes kind of spiders out from there, but you can literally just get a hold of me personally from there too.
I love it. I love it. Well, hey, any last inspiring words? Dream something big with the travel that you have as head your dream. You created this incredible enterprise, and you're doing some big things. Any last inspiring words or any IO secrets that you want to share as a nugget?
I definitely would say that don't give up, especially for business owners. There's been many times where it's been hard. It's lost clients, economy downturns. Good employees leave, or in many situations, we've recently had a couple different team members honestly pass away, and so there's just different hardships that are going to happen. And while building, and this is something that we had to work together very recently, where you have to try to help keep the company going while literally grieving. And so being able to, it's not that your company should, I would say it depends on if you think of your company as your baby, but, I don't like it when the trend of quiet quitters or people thinking the company can go on without me. We all had to really feel that. It's like, yes, the company does have to go on without you. We still had to support our clients and make sure businesses were happening, but not lose that heart. Make sure that we genuinely care about our people and their families, and we're very aware that the company is in existence, and it does supply an income and a way of life for our people throughout the world, and we have changed lives in different countries for that. And so that is very meaningful for us, but it definitely, I don't think of business owners, you really, if you put your people first, this is very well known in IO Psych and obviously in business in general, but if you treat your people right, your customers, your clients will be treated right, and it will snowball down from there, and it will trickle back up to your line of revenue. So don't lose sight on why you went into business. Don't lose your vision or your heart. And, don't just think of your people as cogs in a wheel. Make sure you've got the right people in the right seats and that you really want them to, support your business and support you.
Well, Go4CEO community, Michelle just shared building others means business, right? John the Bomb. And that's my acronym for a reason, Michelle. I appreciate the way you just ended that, because there's a lot of heart, a lot of authenticity that you just shared, and things that happen in your business. We're all human beings. We're growing businesses. We're developing relationships, but things happen, and it's how you kind of maneuver and adjust and support each other. So really awesome stuff. Hey, by the way, subscribe to the channel, Go4CEO community, or if you're new to the channel, take a look at this episode and replay it a few times. Michelle shared some wisdom of nuggets, and she's doing some big things. So thank you so much for being on the Go4CEO channel, Michelle, and we'll hopefully have you, in the next 12 to 18 months on again.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much.